It's very rare that I feel like I've made a mistake on my channel when it comes to covering a show. But Kakushigoto is one of those mistakes. Not because it was a bad show and I regret covering it for the 4 episodes that I did, but the regret is that I stopped covering it. Real life got in the way and I didn't have time to cover it based on the day that it was airing. But Kakushigoto, I'm here to say, is honestly close to a masterpiece for what I personally look for in a father-daughter comedy with a slight hint to then major hint of drama. This is a show that I think, whether you're a fan of family dynamics or you're completely against them, which I'm generally in that category, father-daughter duos, don't care about them. Could care less about them. I can count on my hand how many I really enjoy. We have Shelter, a music video that uses visual storytelling as it uses this beautiful piece of music to tell a father-daughter dystopian tale. You have Somali and the Forest Spirit, an earlier series that came out this year. A golem and a girl, dying golem, little girl, you know you're gonna have those tears. You have Sweetness and Lightning, an actual real father-daughter, really cute, sometimes funny series. A Barakamon, you have sort of a father-daughter dynamic. Not really father-daughter, but it kind of fits that category if I'm being honest. The whole calligraphy, and it just feels pretty sweet overall. Really, these types of shows, they're not for me. They're just not my cup of tea. So when I like one, there's a reason for it. It completely broke down the barriers that generally keep me away. And Kakushigoto is one of my personal favorites in this category. The show can be explained as a lewd manga author who writes a manga that seemingly is kind of battle shonen-y, where you got these fights, you got panty jokes, you just got dirty jokes across the board. Nothing out of the ordinary, especially in the manga and anime world. The difference is this man, Kakushigoto, a father. He's a proud father, and his little girl Hime is his world, his apple of his eye, and he wants to protect her innocence. So he pretends to be a normal businessman, a general salaryman, who goes to work in a tuxedo, makes sure he's got a nice suit on, nice haircut, everything looks good. And by the time he gets to his office, he is a manga author. And the show is centered around comedy. It's centered around very quick slapshot comedy where it's non-stop trying to give you funny faces, funny interactions. There's a ton of references to real-world series, so if you keep your eyes peeled, you can probably see one of your personal favorites either currently airing in serial magazines or even anime that you're watching right now, or something from way back in the day. What makes the show so great is that if you enjoy the comedy from episode 1, you'll enjoy it all the way to episode 11. The reason I say episode 11 is episode 12 takes a more serious turn. The comedy has a formula that it uses. It has a pretty hefty sized cast of characters that all have distinct personalities who generally work alongside Kakashi, and then there's the school, and then there's just different people that he will interact with in his day-to-day life. All are fun, all are bouncy, and pretty much everyone knows of his secret, and they will help him to keep that secret. The whole obstacle and the whole thing that could really turn everything into chaos is Hime, but Hime is also the entire point of keeping that whole lie afloat. I love the idea of not having anything actually be all that serious. A logical person from an outsider looking in could say, even if she realizes that you draw dirty jokes for a living, she's not going to look at you any different. We can see how this girl is and how highly she thinks of her father. I feel like if you were to say, Hime, you can say the F-bomb, she would say, no, my daddy would not like that. She is so pure and innocent that you know she wouldn't try to emulate her father. But if we put ourselves in his position and you see how precious she is, you kind of want to be like, anyone would do the same thing, and you would kind of feel embarrassed because when you have names of series and you have these jokes and you look at what you're making for a living, even if you like the work, there is probably going to be a part of you saying, how many times could you be in a social circle and say, oh, this is what I do for a living, show them, and not have a slight hint of embarrassment? Of course, there's always that, like, be proud of what you do, be proud of what you watch and what you like, but most people would get a little embarrassed, especially considering he's not the most popular mangaka in existence. It's really nice to have this insane comedy that isn't this life or death stakes. It's not like we're scared Hime's gonna end up tragically brainwashed at being a pervert or anything like that. We personally feel like if it gets revealed, nothing bad will happen. But the longer it doesn't get revealed, the more funny scenes we can have. And the constant escalation of misunderstandings, not even just between the father and daughter who constantly misread the situations, and you would think it would just be on Hime's side, but you also have Kakashi who continues to misread and interpret things as like, oh, she really likes this chocolate, so I'm going to keep buying her this chocolate, when really she just wants to win a prize. Oh, she thinks we're living in a bad situation, when really she thinks, oh, everyone thinks we're poor, but I'm really happy with my situation, not realizing that he just so happened to build a house that ties into his past, not that he can't afford something better. There's this constant misunderstanding, but then you have it on Kakushi's side, where he also misunderstands or just completely chooses to ignore how different characters interact with him. There's a few different female potential love interests who all really want Kakushi. He'll be talking with them and they'll be thinking, oh, this is a confession, this is where it's going, when really he's just trying to get advice for his daughter. And when he gets it, he'll abandon them and they'll get really mad. And then when they all interact with each other, they get very, very jealous. There's a level of misunderstanding that continues to make the comedy very, very fun. But the thing that ties the show all together for me is the dramatic and very, very sad side. At the end of every episode, you slowly get this modern day story. A 17 to 18-year-old looking Hime who finds boxes, and the boxes tie a pretty big importance to the lost mother, the mother who lost her life far too young, and Hime doesn't even really remember her. Over the course of the show, you start to assume that Kakushi is dead at this point, and she has discovered his secret, and it's gonna bring out the waterworks. And I'm not gonna go into too many specifics with episode 12. I will say episode 12 is the best episode and the least funny episode in my honest opinion. What I love about the show is where I thought the ending was going to go, it didn't go to that direction exactly. There was an element that kind of matched up what I thought was gonna happen, and as the ending continues to go and you get this emotional buildup, I honestly started tearing up towards the end of the show. It was emotionally engaging seeing these characters who we saw as little girls, or, you know, they were young up-and-coming mangakas, or seeing them all in their adult life and seeing where Hime ultimately ended up and where Kakushi ultimately ended up. It just brought a giant grin and felt so conclusive that you can see more being done in a different style and in a different presentation. But it honestly feels like 12 episodes was perfect. If anything, I would want a season 2 to cover before episode 12, because there's plenty of room to continue to fleshing out up until that ending. And that's what I really like about it, is that the characters weren't necessarily there to be this overly developed fleshed out cast who all got this crazy character arc. Rather, they were there to be support for the comedy, but then also they were there to be the support for the drama when it absolutely counted. And the story of Hime and Kakushi was absolutely phenomenal. I have to say, the presentation was immaculate. It was amazing to see the simplistic beauty of just having these very basic character designs slide in on screen, have a funny face, have a funny reaction, and they get this very dramatic, almost like you get the sakuga in a certain sense for the comedic value. One of my favorite parts of the overall design was this kind of like grid-like presentation they'll apply on the hair on these very hyper detailed shots to give it a much more refined look and this kind of like sparkly, this little blush to really elevate a scene to make it feel very well polished and refined for those key select moments. The character designs across the board I thought were fantastic. Kakushi kind of being this character you look at and you can say, I can see how he could look like a manga author, but at the same time, I completely see how he can blend in with normal kind of high-class society and why his daughter wouldn't question it. It's not a matter of her age being ignorant to what her dad's actually doing. He cleans up nicely, and I think that's a very interesting character choice, because a lot of times you would see a character like Kakushi, this lewd manga author who really would be a bum, and that's how he would get around convincing a little girl that he's actually so much more. But rather, he actually does clean up quite nicely, and it's interesting how that can either bite him in the ass or actually compliment him down different jokes and different arcs in the series. Hime herself is the epitome of adorable. She's cute. There's nothing offensive about her design. And generally when you have little girls in anime, it does get rather offensive, but she was innocent. She was pure. You wanted to protect her smile, and that's what made it very easy to relate with Kakushi's ambitions and goals. And the gorgeous background art, I have to say. When they get outside and you get to see trees and buildings, there was times where it completely made my jaw drop, and I was like, this is perfect wallpaper quality. When they go into the difference of the modern day versus the past is a lot more cartoonish and, you know, just a little ridiculous. But then when you get into the more teenage to adult years of Hime, it's a very vibrant and almost goes hyper-realistic. It's very interesting how they distinguish the past and the present in a very subtle, but it also feels drastic. If you take a shot of the modern and you take a shot of the past and you put them side by side, you can tell the difference, but they feel like they do belong in the same series. And that's a very good detail and very high point for the show overall. If it wasn't for the visuals, if it wasn't for how it was directed, the comedy wouldn't have even landed half of the time. The comedy and the jokes really did work hand in hand to deliver a very funny show, and when it did want to get serious and dramatic, it honestly pulled on my heartstrings quite well. In terms of the voice acting, the music was fine, the opening and endings were great, but the thing that seals it is the incredible voice acting in the Japanese dub. I did watch a few episodes in the English, and I don't think anything was bad about it, but there's a thing with Japanese comedy that I feel like when you get into comedy, it can usually be good to watch it in your native tongue to get more modern and translated jokes so it doesn't feel as tied to Japanese culture, which you may not get the reference. And there's a couple of moments in the show, honestly, the jokes flew over my head because I didn't understand labels of names and why certain senseis and then they'd escalate to what comes after sensei and how that could be an insult. Wasn't really anything that caught my interest, and I didn't laugh as much, and when I watched it in the English, it felt a lot more humorous. But Kakushi's voice actor and Hime's voice actress are two characters that cannot be replaced, and watching them in any other than the Japanese feels very acted. Where with Kakushi, he feels like a bombastic, very carefree, but very loving guy, and you don't feel like he's an anime character, where in the English I felt like he kinda did. With Hime just being a cute kid and not some adult or anything reading off a script and things like that. I just felt like the voice actors had a lot of fun, but it felt like there's these nuances, these very subtle cues that couldn't really be replicated in any other dub. The just realism and believable factor to the show really did suck me in and make me say, this is the perfect Japanese casting, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And this is coming from someone who generally prefers comedies in the English dub. Even if the dubs are slightly worse performances, it just feels like it's easier for me to laugh alongside it because it's being translated to be a joke that's more modern to the United States or Canada and things like that. But Kakushigoto didn't need that. There's a couple of small moments, but overall, the casting was spot on. This is a show that doesn't necessarily fit my wheelhouse, something that I would normally go out of my way to watch, but Kakushigoto proved me wrong. The comedy hooked me in, and the slight being like, oh, is he dead? Is he gone? Did he leave her? That little drama mystery was kind of alive and well. It was something that intrigued us each week. We knew we were going to get a new, continuing on this like 10-minute plotline that got stretched over 11 episodes, and by episode 12 you got the full reveal. But it did become something so much more. I can't think of a single character I would change. You have an editor who thinks he's so great and he's the reason everything works out so well, when really, it's just lucky coincidence that he's that good. You have such stunningly directing jokes, like Kakushi thinking his manga's getting axed so he has nothing to lose, so he becomes this crazy, gives no shits attitude, and he actually makes his series better than it ever was, and by the time he realizes he's not getting fired, his manga kind of crashes because people lose interest because he goes back to his general routine. There's a lot of really intelligently written jokes that can actually last episodes, and it's nice to see a continuation with a comedy series with a very serious plotline that almost made me cry. And while you could call me weak or you could say, oh, you're overreacting, that's how I felt. Watching 8 episodes of this, I watched the first 4 when they aired, and I got back into it and watched the last 8 just recently. It really did hook me, and I highly recommend anyone, whether you like family stories or you hate them, to watch Kakushigoto for one of the funniest and one of the most entertainingly wholesome and sad father-daughter stories I have personally ever seen. Whatever you're feeling about Kakushigoto or this video, be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, also remember to leave a like to show your support, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. If you also like what you see around here and you want to help out even more, there's always the Patreon where you can see new videos such as these early, or some of the other perks that I offer as well. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.